Well, if you've been paying attention, then you know why we're here. It's time to put Holley Sniper EFI and Duratec, or correction, Hyperspark ignition into this 64 Riviera here. Now, if I'm going to be completely honest, I'm a little bit skeptical. Let's just say I have a brand new rebuilt carburetor sitting on the shelf just in case I don't like any of this and I want to rip it back off. 10 years ago, these bolt-on EFI throttle body injection style carb injection things were garbage. Now, it seems like every YouTube channel out there is putting them on everything. And it's hard to know who's sponsored, who's doing product placement or any of that stuff. I can tell you, nobody's sponsoring me, and everything on this channel I pay for. So, but enough of my friends have this injection setup at this point that they all recommend it and say it's badass, so they've convinced me. And I'm not going for maximum power here. If I was going for max power, I'd keep it carbureted, but I want this to be something that my wife can take our daughter in and go to the store or go for a drive on a 20-degree day, on a 100-degree day, across the country, altitude changes, and it just works. That's what I want. I want ease and reliability. So let's take one last gander at the old carburetor here. There she is. Buick 425 nailhead, also known as a Buick 465 Wildcat for 460 foot-pounds of torque. And honestly, thing sounds cool, runs great, works a long time. But let's get to ripping it all apart. All right, well, time to get you guys caught up. So far, I've taken the entire top end off the motor and pulled the stock ignition system out. Next thing up is going to be to remove that mechanical fuel pump because we don't need it anymore. And it looks like it's been leaking anyway. So that bad boy's got to come off. Meantime, replace the shocks on the front, and if we move to the back, replace the shocks, found that the left shock wasn't even attached up at the top of the car, stole the hardware off the parts car over there, took the track bar off, and it was completely roached. Put poly bushings in it, reinstalled, so the rear end wandering should be solved. I'm sure these front bushings need replaced too, but that wasn't what was causing that wandering feeling. It was definitely this track bar, and that left shock not being connected didn't help. Also replaced the rear drums, completely bled the system. Replaced the one brake line that comes off the hard line to the rear axle with a stainless braided one. I actually repurposed one of those front 16-inch lines, converted from a 7/16 by 20 to an A&3 on both sides. So the brake system is online. I got the rear tires mounted, but that brings me to the next complaint about this Wilwood brake kit. I swear to God, every time I put a Wilwood kit on a car, they say it bolts on, I run into problems. Missing hardware, missing, you know, brake line fittings that they don't give you that you need, like the fact that this didn't come with a new cotter pin or nut. There's just stuff like that. But more importantly, they claim that the 15-inch stock 15s will fit. Then they have small print that 15s may not fit. But this is supposed to be a bolt-on 64 Riviera brake kit. That is the 64 Riviera wheel. They all had those wheels. They just came with different hubcaps. And the wheel hits the caliper. You can see that line right there. That's from the wheel rubbing on the caliper. So I found other people who've had this issues, and they say 1/4-inch wheel spacers work. And this kit actually narrows the track width a little bit. So a 1/4-inch wheel spacer isn't going to hurt us as far as pushing the tire out. So I should get those today, and then I'll be able to have the tires on the car, put the hubcaps back on. So that means brake system fixed, rebuilt, new tires, and fix the rear end issue with the track bar and the sway, and new shocks. So now all we've got left to do to get this thing road trip ready is the power steering system is just, look at that. That's all the power steering fluid. all of the fluid. So I've got a brand new system. I've got a new box. I've got a new donut, new lines, new pump. But to be honest with you, that's like the last thing I'm gonna do, because the worst case scenario, I don't get a chance to fix it before the road trip, then we're just gonna dump power steering fluid in it and keep topping it off, and I'll fix it later. But the next big thing is to get this Holley Sniper installed, and let me show you where we're at with that. Okay, so I've torn down the motor. I've actually got the valve covers and the valley cover just sitting on there as dust covers to keep stuff out of the motor. And I figured while we're in here, I can't put the motor back together looking like this. So I went ahead and found a guy that powder coats stock valley covers and anyhow. So those are supposed to be here tomorrow, and that'll clean this up significantly. I did find some more problems while I was in here, of course, because it's a 60-year-old car. Got some vacuum lines I need to replace. I don't think there's a thermostat in this thing. I have a thermostat laying around, so I'm gonna pop that off. Also, the Buick uses 1/2" NPT, and the Holley Sniper sensor is a 3/8 NPT. The stock light, coolant light, uses that spot right there, and there's a blanking plug in the head back here where my finger's at. That's where I'm gonna put the Holley Sniper coolant temperature. So I'll maintain the factory light, and it'll look factory. I'm trying to put this Sniper in here and make it look factory to the untrained eye, you know what I'm saying? So even though he's got some relays and stuff in here that weren't stock, I want to try to keep it stock. I also, like, he's got a battery disconnect on here, but yeah, I don't like that. I'm gonna have to change that. So anyways, the other problem I found is this intake manifold. When I took it off, I found that the back mount lug was broke. The good news is I've got a nail head on the stand over there, and the 401 stuff is the exact same as the 425. So I went ahead and took that 401 nail head manifold off, and I cleaned it and painted it. And then the other issue is these things used exhaust heat to heat the carburetor in the cold. Well, that really damages the bottom of the carb over time. These get all sooted up. And with that modern electronic EFI, I don't want extra heat going to it because the ECU is located in the unit. So I went ahead and got these blanking plugs, tapped the holes, put some blanking plugs in there. So now the exhaust heat won't be able to, it's deleted, you know what I'm saying? And so I painted that. The paint that I used is pretty close to nailhead paint. I found on the forums, a lot of guys use it. It's DE1618 Detroit Diesel Alpine Green. It's a little bit more flat. It's like a darker hue than the nailhead hue, but it's close enough. And that looks amazing just with a little bit of paint on it. So where we're at now, I'm gonna delete that mechanical fuel pump, and then I'll probably stab in the new Hyperspark distributor. And then really we're waiting on the valve covers and the valley pan to get here tomorrow. And that's that. Science. All right, there she is, Pierce fuel pump. Still working good. I'm keeping that for my, you know, in case the Holley sucks emergency fund. But anyhow, you can see that's where the fuel pump goes, rides on the cam. I stuck a magnet in there. I can't tell for sure if the timing chain's been replaced, but I don't think it has. So that's gonna be on my list of things to do in the winter time, because that's a ticking time bomb. GM used those terrible nylon covered timing chains. But one of the reasons that fuel pump was leaking was, one, the bolts were loose, and that rear bolt's a pain in the ass. I think Buick, when they designed this motor, is like, let me just put everything on the #1 side, the air conditioner, and just make it a huge pain in the ass for a mechanic. But also the housing is pretty roughed up, because I'm sure this guy's had some fuel pumps, many a fuel pump change in its day. So I'm gonna use Right Stuff, also known as the wrong stuff. and I'm gonna stick that block off plate on there. So here's the 2 bolts from the old pump. I got this off of Fleabay. Pretty cool little, you know, ribbed for the car's pleasure part here. So we're gonna block this off. Real simple. I'm just gonna goop it up with RTV, put it on. We don't need it no more. All right. Well, I drained about 11 gallons of gas out of the Riv here. Pretty high. Probably could have thought that through a little bit better, but I'm gonna drop the tank because I'm gonna have to drill a return line, and the fuel lines need to both be 3/8. So also the gas gauge isn't all that accurate, and if I'm dropping the tank, I don't know, I might replace the sender. I'm thinking on it, you know what I'm saying? But I'm about 4 cold beers in, so I don't know how much more productivity I'm gonna have. Let's at least get the gas tank out, you know what I'm saying? Well, I figured you guys want to watch me, you know, mess with this thing like a football, you know what I'm saying? Well, not sure what we're going to be able to save or not save, but the good news is these bolts are good. The straps seem to be okay. Well, might as well just drop all that on the floor for now. And let's get this tank out of here. I'll tell you, these transmission jacks are, I use it a lot more than just for the old transmission, you know what I'm saying? I think I might just be able to monkey this thing out on my own. Mostly empty. Oh man, there's about 800 Hornets houses up in this girl here. Now we're gonna need to cut some fuel line here. Let me just get some. Oof. I am high as a kite right now. Good old gasolina. What is that gasolina? Son of a. I'm gonna get some dikes to make this easy. What is that music called? Reggaeton? No, that ain't right. What is that gasolina? Okay. I'm gonna have to cut this. Let's go ahead and cut this sender wire. Oh yeah, there we go. Not bad at all. Oh, you know, this tank actually in decent shape, but that tank's in good shape, but a couple of wasp nests and a whole lot of dirt. But here's the problem. 1/4 inch return. I think this is 3/8. It might be 5/16. I gotta double check. But one thing with fuel injection, fuel flow. And Holley calls for 3/8 flow, 3/8 return. And a lot of people have problems because they just try to make these small lines work. And even if you run a 3/8 line of that, you know, 1/4 inch hard line, it's choking it down. So I think what I'm gonna do is I don't know, I might use this and just, Holley gives us in the kit a fitting to drill a return in, but either way this has to come out so that we can access the back side of the fitting. So I might replace the sender because I don't want to have to take this fuel tank out again. I think the tank's okay. I didn't see anything come out of that fuel, and honestly this might have been replaced before because the top of this tank looks pretty pristine. I'll have to look into it, but look at that. Solid trunk floor. That's what I'm looking at. And here's the deal. I think this might actually be original. And if it's not original, it was replaced early on in the car's life. It still works. The float, but the filter screen is dry rotted, so it needs to be replaced anyway. I mean, I was able to get it off without destroying the gasket, but the gasket's kind of smushed. These aren't that expensive, so while I got the tank out, I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. But I do think the tank's original. Good news is everything that comes in this kit is going to work out perfect for this. I'm going to keep the tank, save some coin there. But Holley sends this bulkhead fitting. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to drill the tank right here, drop this down in, and that's going to be our 3/8 return. Comes with a little straw to feed the fuel down on the bottom to prevent foaming and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll use a regular factory sender, and we'll use this 5/16 as just another vent line, or I'll cap it off. But yeah, I think we're going to get away with just replacing the fuel sender. Then our gauge will work a little bit better. And this fuel line was all rotten anyway, so it needed to be dropped. But the reality is, to drill this, I'm going to need to blow the tank out, make sure all the particulate's out of it, and I'm going to have to access the nut from the backside. So tank needed to come. Okay, well, I'm going to run the return line using this vapor guard along the driver's side of the frame. For now, I've just got it mocked and ran. I've got some hose clamps and some self-tapping screws coming, but I've got it basically ran up where it needs to go in the motor. And you can see the factory lines are on the passenger side. I'm going to keep those in place in case we ever go back to a carb. But for now, my EFI return line is going to be moving to the back. I went ahead and got the fuel pump mounted. Now this isn't ideal, but it's the best I could come up with. You want it to be below the fuel tank. This will at least be below the fuel as it comes out of the tank. But that's the safest place I could put it. And so I've got a pre-filter on here that comes with the kit. Of course, the pump comes with garbage hardware. I tried getting it in the frame. I pre-drilled it and everything, and the hardware stripped. So then I tried to get fancy and I put riv nuts in there, and then the front two went in good, the back two I screwed up. So the good news is it's solidly mounted. That's a future Jimmy problem. I'm gonna hate myself when this inevitably fails and I have to change it on the side of the road. But you can see I'm gonna end up using clamps and securing this hose. This return line is gonna come to the tank. This is gonna get clamped up, obviously, but the fuel pressure is coming out of the pump into that 3/8 factory hard line. So the hard part of the pressurizing of the fuel system is pretty much done. And then I went ahead and used the fitting that they include in the kit. See, I drilled the tank here, and that's a bulkhead fitting that uses a dowry washer on the top and the bottom, and then has a nut on the back side. And I've already cut my fingers up pretty good getting them in here, but you got to be able to get a wrench on it. I went ahead and coated it with some sealant, but basically that return is going to dump right here in the tank. So again, it ends up being pretty trick because factory fuel sender comes in here. This is going to be the feed that goes into the electric pump. This isn't going to get used anymore. And then this is going to be the return. And if we ever go back to carb, we cap that with an AN6 fitting, and we put the return line of the hard line on the frame back to this, and we're back to a carb. So we can end up going back to a carb if we want to. One more filter here. That's this straw has to go on one of these vapor guard fittings and then get trimmed to go on that fitting I drilled in the tank. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I'm going to cut my fingers up real good doing that, but okay, well, it's time to drop the distributor in. yeah, that's perfect right there. Okay, so on Buicks, #1 cylinder is the passenger front. And in front of the motor, like I am, the very left forward cylinder. Right there. This distributor is pretty simple. Once you got your motor on top dead center, which for the Buick, you can see right down there, there's a 0 and a white line. Can you see it? I don't know if you can see it. These motors are set at 2.5 degrees before top dead center, but since we're dropping the distributor in, you can see #1, neither valve's on the rock, and you can see that the pointer distributor is facing generally that cylinder. So now we're gonna phase, what Holley calls phase the distributor. So they give you this sweet little cap here, and you basically put that on the rotor and you turn the distributor until the body lines up with the rotor. And then there's a little indentation mark on the cap, which is going to correspond to your #1 spark plug wire. So if you can see that, see how the cap goes on there, and you just turn the body till it lines up, and then you scribe your mark. So that white mark is where our #1 spark plug wire is going to go. So now we're going to put the distributor cap on there and tighten screws down. I gotta lock the girl in place. It's weird on these Buicks, the distributor actually sits in like side, it's like on a slant angle. Weird. Alright, so now I've got the factory lock tab on, and I'm just locking the distributor body in place with that Holley clear tool, making sure I've got it lined up where it needs to be. Now all we gotta do is put the cap on. I'm just gonna make my mark more noticeable, and then I'm just gonna put a #1 right on the cap. Boom. Hyperspark distributor installed. Alright, progress has been made. Hyperspark is in. I went ahead and mounted the coil there. I didn't want to put on the firewall, but man, this engine compartment is full of stuff. So went ahead and put the Hyperspark ignition control box here. I got 2 riv nuts good, screwed another one up, so I'll have to fix that. Just riv nut is not my day today. But so far pretty easy. This stuff is all plug and play. Distributor's got a harness that plugs in. That pink goes to 12 volt. The other harness goes to the main harness for the EFI. This Hyperspark box has a power and a ground that goes direct to the battery. This little guy here goes to the EFI main harness. But most of the wiring is done for you if you buy the complete system. The Hyperspark with the Holley Sniper, most of it just plugs right in. So trying to keep the spark wire stuff isolated to this corner to keep it away from the EFI stuff. I'm going to try to run the EFI harness stuff that way, just to keep EFI, RFI stuff to a minimum. And then I've got some other tricks and tips that I'm going to do that you'll guys see in the video. But I think that's it for today. I keep saying I'm done, and then I keep doing more stuff, but the ignition system is basically installed. and that took me less than an hour. So far so good.